Please, I'm begging you, the woman in the $1,000 suit whispered, her voice cracking. Evan Reed, a waiter just ending his shift, stared at her. This was Adriana Langley, the CEO of Langley Innovations, a woman famous for her ice-cold control. And she had just cornered him by the restaurant's steaming dumpsters. You're a waiter. You have a daughter. You're perfect. Evan instinctively took a step back, the smell of alley grime mixing with her expensive perfume. Perfect for what? He automatically checked his watch. His 7-year-old daughter, Piper, was waiting for him in the staff break room, coloring. He was already 5 minutes late. Adriana took a shaky breath, her mask of command shattering. I need you to pretend to be my husband for 1 week. If you don't, she looked over her shoulder, her eyes wide with a fear he'd never seen in a boardroom photo. I lose everything. Evan just looked at her. This had to be a joke, a very, very strange joke. Mrs. Langley, I think you have me confused with someone else. I just brought you your sea base. No, I've been watching you, she said, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. You've been my waiter 3 times this month. I've seen you with your daughter, how you talk to her, how she looks at you. You're gentle. You're believable. Believable as what? As my husband. Adriana's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. I'm about to close the biggest deal of my life. A 9-figure merger with Kenjiro Akagi. It's not just business, it's everything. My company depends on this. Evan frowned. What does your merger have to do with me? Because Mr. Akagi isn't a normal billionaire, she explained, pacing the small damp space between the wall and the dumpsters. He's old school. He doesn't trust contracts as much as he trusts character. His entire philosophy is built on family, on legacy, on stability. He's known for it. He walks away from deals if he senses dysfunction. She stopped, her gaze desperate. He's flying in from Tokyo in 3 days. He has insisted on having a celebratory dinner with me and my happy family at my home. It's the final test. So, Evan said slowly, what's the problem with your actual family? Adriana's face hardened, the brief vulnerability vanishing, replaced by a flash of pure venom. My actual family consists of my ex-husband Damien, who left me for his assistant a year ago. A year ago to the day of this dinner, in fact. An event so public, it caused my 5-year-old daughter, Cora, to stop speaking. She's selectively mute. Hasn't said a word since. Evan's posture changed. The waiter disappeared, and something else flickered in his eyes, a deep, familiar ache. Damien knows about this deal, Adriana continued, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. He's jealous. He's vindictive. He's threatening to call Akagi's office and expose me, to tell him I'm a failed wife, a failed mother, and that my entire life is a lie. He'll sabotage everything. She stepped closer. I saw you tonight. You're a single father. You're a waiter. You need money. I will give you $500,000, cash, for 1 week of your time. You move into my penthouse. You play the part of my loving husband. You smile for the old man, and then you disappear. No one gets hurt, and you are rich. Please, he'll be here in 3 days. I'm out of time. $500,000. Evan's mind reeled. That was life-changing. It was a house, not a rented apartment. It was Piper's college fund, guaranteed. It was an end to double shifts and aching feet and the constant dull panic about next month's rent. He could finally breathe. He looked at Adriana Langley. She was right. He was a waiter. She saw him as a simple prop, a desperate man who could be bought and controlled. An easy fix. He thought about Piper, waiting for him, her crayons and her unwavering trust. He thought about his old life, the one before the aprons and the trays, the life he'd buried. I won't take your money, Evan said, his voice quiet but firm. Adriana blinked, the certainty draining from her face. What? Of course you will. I'll make it $700,000. Just name your price. I don't want your money, Mrs. Langley, Evan repeated, cutting her off. The alley suddenly felt very still. Then, what? What do you want? Evan took a breath. This was the moment. I'll do it. I'll be your fake husband for 1 week. Relief flooded her features, but he held up a hand. On one condition. My daughter Piper comes with me. We're a package deal. If I'm playing a family man, I'm not abandoning my own daughter for a week to do it. Adriana hesitated. A second child? I don't know. And my second condition, Evan said, his gaze locking on hers, suddenly intense, is the one that leaves you speechless. From the moment I walk into your home until the moment Mr. Akagi leaves, all your nannies, your specialists, your therapists for Cora, they're gone. That's absurd, Adriana hissed. My daughter has the best care. The best care isn't working, Evan said bluntly, but not unkindly. You said it yourself. She hasn't spoken in a year. For this 1 week, I'm in charge of Cora. My way. No interference. You will let me use my own methods to try and help her. You don't get to watch on cameras, you don't get to demand progress reports, and you don't get to tell me I'm doing it wrong. You have to trust me. Adriana stared at him, truly speechless. This was not the simple, controllable waiter she had tried to buy. This was something else. Who are you? I'm the man you just begged to save your company, Evan said. And that's my price. Not your money. My rules. He could see the calculations warring in her head. The panic, the fury at being cornered, and the sliver of desperation. She was trapped. Fine, Adriana bit out, the words sharp as glass. Fine. My driver is out front. Get your daughter. Evan nodded once. He turned and walked back into the restaurant, leaving the CEO standing alone in the alley. He opened the break room door, and Piper's head popped up, her face breaking into a huge smile. Daddy! You're done. Hey, Pipes, he said, forcing a calm smile. Guess what? We're going to go on a little adventure. 10 minutes later, Evan Reed, holding a backpack stuffed with Piper's coloring books and a spare set of clothes, buckled his daughter into the back of a black Maybach. The leather smelled like new money. Adriana Langley sat in the front, staring straight ahead, her phone already buzzing. The car pulled silently into traffic. Piper looked out the window, her eyes wide with wonder at the city lights blurring past. Wow, Daddy, is this a spaceship? Something like that, sweetheart, Evan murmured, his hand tightening on his own. He looked at the rigid line of Adriana's shoulder in the front seat. The car was silent, a tense, airless bubble moving through the night. The adventure had begun, and Evan was already wondering which of them was in more danger. The Maybach didn't so much park as it did arrive. It slipped into a private underground garage, a concrete vault that echoed with silence. A private elevator opened directly into the penthouse. The doors slid open, and Piper gasped. Evan understood why. It wasn't a home. It was an exhibit. The floors were white marble that looked like polished ice. The walls were almost entirely glass, revealing a 360-degree view of the city glittering below them like a carpet of diamonds. The furniture was all sharp angles, chrome and leather, in shades of gray and black. There wasn't a single photograph, not a book out of place, not a smudge on any surface. The only sound was the faint, sterile hum of the air filtration system. This way, Adriana said, her voice already back to its clipped, boardroom tone. She kicked off her heels by the door with a sharp clack-clack and strode barefoot across the marble. A woman in a severe gray uniform, her hair in a tight bun, emerged from a hallway. Mrs. Langley, you're home early. Her eyes flickered to Evan and Piper, her expression a blank mask that still managed to convey disapproval. Mrs. Greer, these are my guests. Evan and his daughter Piper, Adriana said, the word guests sounding foreign on her tongue. They'll be staying for the week. In the main guest suite. Mrs. Greer's eyebrows lifted a fraction of an inch. Very good, ma'am. And Mrs. Greer, Adriana added, you and the rest of the staff can take the week off, Paid, of course. We require privacy. Now the mask slipped. Mrs. Greer looked genuinely shocked. Ma'am? But what about Miss Cora? And the dinner preparations for... I will handle it, Adriana snapped. That will be all. Mrs. Greer gave Evan one last suspicious look, then nodded stiffly. As you wish, ma'am. She disappeared down the hallway. Daddy, this place is bigger than my whole school, Piper whispered, clinging to Evan's hand. It's something, Evan agreed. Cora? Cora, I'm home. Adriana's voice echoed in the cavernous space. There was no reply. Adriana sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion, and led them down another hall. She pushed open a white door. The room inside was just as sterile as the rest of the house, only this one was pale pink. In the corner, a tiny girl with big dark eyes and messy brown hair sat on the floor. She was 5 years old, but looked smaller, fragile. She was staring at a tablet in her lap, her thumb moving back and forth in a repetitive, meaningless swipe. A young woman in scrubs, the night nanny, sat in a chair, watching her. Cora, Adriana said again, softer this time. The girl didn't look up. She didn't flinch. It was as if no one had spoken. You can go, Helen, Adriana said to the nanny. I'll take it from here. Your services won't be needed for the rest of the week. The nanny looked relieved. She gathered her things and left, casting a sympathetic glance back at the silent child. Now it was just the four of them. Adriana walked over and stood over Cora, a formidable shadow. Cora, look at me. I'm home. We have guests. No response. The thumb just swiped. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Adriana's jaw tightened. She was embarrassed. Evan could see it clear as day. This was not part of the happy family image. Hi, Cora, a small voice piped up. Piper had let go of Evan's hand and crept forward. She knelt on the floor a few feet away from Cora. My name's Piper, she said, holding out her worn, slightly grubby teddy bear. This is Barnaby. He likes pancakes and hates broccoli. What's your tablet's name? Cora's thumb paused. For 1/10 of a second, her eyes darted to Piper, then back to the screen. It was the first real reaction she'd shown. Adriana let out an impatient breath. She doesn't talk. I told you, it's useless. Evan put a hand on her arm. Adriana, go to your office. Go do whatever it is you do. We'll be fine. I can't just... You agreed, Evan said, his voice low and firm. My rules. No interference. Go. Adriana looked from Evan's steady gaze to her daughter's vacant one. She was a woman who commanded thousands, and she was utterly lost in this 12 by 12 room. She turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing her retreat. Evan sat on the floor, leaning his back against the wall. He pulled a coloring book and a broken crayon from Piper's bag. He didn't look at Cora. He just started coloring, badly, going outside the lines of a cartoon dinosaur. Piper, understanding the cue, sat next to him and started chattering. No, Daddy, you're doing it all wrong. The T-Rex is green, not blue. Everybody knows that. Barnaby knows that. They sat there for an hour, coloring, talking about school, making up silly stories. Cora never looked up, but the repetitive swipe, swipe, swipe from her tablet had stopped. She was just listening. Later, Evan tucked Piper into the massive cloud-like bed in the guest suite. Daddy, that little girl is sad, Piper murmured, her eyes heavy with sleep. I know, baby, Evan said, kissing her forehead. That's why we're here. To help. Okay, she yawned. Can we have pancakes for breakfast? I'll see what I can do, he smiled. He walked out into the main living area. The city lights were dazzling, but inside the penthouse was dark and cold. He found Adriana in a vast kitchen that looked like it had never been used. She was staring into an empty stainless steel refrigerator, holding a bottle of water. Is she asleep? Adriana asked, not turning around. Piper is. Cora is... In her room. This is a mistake, Adriana whispered, leaning her head against the fridge. This is never going to work. Akagi will see right through it. He'll see her. He'll know. He'll know what? Evan said, walking closer. That she's a child who's hurting. That she's scared. He'll know that I can't even manage my own home. Adriana shot back, her voice tight. He'll see weakness. That's all Damien is. That's all this is. A weakness. Evan looked at this powerful, brilliant woman who saw her daughter's pain as a liability. She's not a weakness, Adriana. She's a kid, he said. Get some sleep. We start tomorrow. Start what? My method, Evan said, opening and closing cabinets. He found a single, lonely-looking bag of flour in the back of a pantry. Tomorrow we make pancakes. Adriana just stared at him like he was insane. But for the first time that night, she didn't argue. She just watched him as he hunted for a mixing bowl. A man in a waiter's uniform planning a meal in a kitchen worth more than his car. And for a split second, the house felt a tiny bit warmer. The next morning, Evan was up before the sun, the city lights still twinkling outside the glass walls. He found the high-tech coffee machine and, after a brief, confusing battle with its touch screen, managed to brew a pot. The smell of coffee was the first remotely human thing that had happened in the penthouse. He heard a small sound and turned. Cora was standing in the kitchen doorway, a small, silent shadow in her pajamas. She was clutching a worn, gray stuffed elephant. She hadn't made a sound, but he'd felt her presence. Morning, Cora, Evan said, his voice casual. He didn't kneel. He didn't try to get her attention. He just went back to the pantry, pulling out the flour, an egg carton, and a jug of milk he'd had delivered in the middle of the night along with chocolate chips and maple syrup. Piper bounded in moments later, her hair a mess of tangles, dragging Barnaby the bear by one ear. Pancakes! Is it pancake time? It is pancake time, Evan confirmed, handing her a plastic mixing bowl. You're on stirring duty. Yes, Piper cheered. She pulled a stool over to the counter. Evan began mixing the batter, narrating his actions. Okay, so we need 2 cups of flour. And Piper, what's the most important ingredient? Chocolate chips, she yelled. Exactly. 1,000,000 chocolate chips. He poured a handful into the batter, and Piper began to stir with messy enthusiasm, sloshing a bit over the side. In a normal home, it would be nothing. In this pristine white kitchen, it felt like an act of rebellion. Cora hadn't moved. She just watched from the doorway, her dark eyes tracking the activity. She was invisible, and she knew it. Hey, Pipes, can you ask our guest if she likes chocolate chips? Evan asked, his back to Cora. Piper, catching on, turned on her stool. Hey, Cora, you want chocolate chips or blueberries? Daddy can't make blueberry ones. They always look gross. Cora just stared, her grip tightening on the elephant's ear. She's shy, Daddy? Piper whispered. That's okay, Evan said. We'll just make extra. In case. The kitchen soon filled with a warm, sweet smell of pancakes. Evan flipped them onto plates. He made one for Piper, one for himself, and then he made a third, smaller one. He used 2 chocolate chips for eyes and a slice of banana for a smile. He walked over and placed the plate on the small breakfast table, nowhere near Cora. He just left it there. Pancakes are ready, he announced. Piper dug in. Evan sat down and started eating. They talked, they laughed. They ignored the third plate. Cora inched into the room. She stood by the table. She looked at the pancake. She looked at Evan, who was busy arguing with Piper about whether Barnaby deserved his own bite. Slowly, Cora reached out one tiny finger. She poked the pancake's banana smile. It was a start. The sound of a door slamming shut made all 3 of them jump. Adriana strode into the kitchen, already in a sharp blazer, holding her phone to her ear. No, that's unacceptable. I told them the deadline was yesterday. She barked into the phone. She stopped dead, staring at the scene. She saw the spilled batter on her marble island, She saw the sticky syrup container. She saw the plates. And she saw her daughter, Cora, standing at the table, her finger covered in pancake batter. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice dangerously low. "It's breakfast," Evan said, standing up. "It's a mess," Adriana snapped. "I have a $200 million deal on the line, and you're making pancakes?" Piper shrank back, her smile vanishing. Cora immediately retreated, backing away until she hit the wall, her eyes wide with fear. The elephant fell to the floor. "Adriana," Evan said, his voice calm but hard. "We had a deal. My rules. My rules didn't include destroying my kitchen and traumatizing my daughter." "Traumatizing her?" Evan said, his voice rising for the first time. "Look at her, Adriana. She was scared of you, not the pancakes. She was about to engage. She touched the food. That's the first step." "A step? I don't need a step," Adriana cried, and now her frustration was so raw it sounded like pain. "I need a miracle. I need Mr. Akagi to see a happy, functional child in 4 days, not one who pokes at her food." "She is not an accessory for your deal," Evan shot back, moving to stand between Adriana and the kids. "She's a child. This is what healing looks like. It's messy, it's slow, it's not a business projection. You can't just order it from a catalog." "How would you know?" Adriana said, her words dripping with condescension. "You're a waiter." The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Evan's face didn't change, but his eyes went cold. "I was a pediatric speech therapist for 10 years, he said, his voice flat. "I specialized in childhood trauma and selective mutism. I ran the top clinic on the West Coast." Adriana's entire posture faltered. What did you say?" "I quit 5 years ago," Evan continued, his voice rough with a memory he never revisited. "When my wife died, I couldn't fix my own life, so I had no business trying to fix anyone else's kids. So yes, I'm a waiter. It's easier. It's quiet." Adriana just stared at him, all the fight draining out of her, replaced by a stunned, hollow look. She had tried to buy a pawn and had, completely by accident, found a king. You never told me. You never asked," Evan said. He turned his back on her, knelt, and picked up Cora's fallen elephant. He didn't try to hand it to her. He just placed it on the chair next to her. "Come on, Pipes," he said, taking his daughter's hand. "Let's go. Build a fort or something. This kitchen is too clean." He walked out, Piper in tow, leaving Adriana Langley alone in her sterile kitchen, with the smell of burnt pancakes and the echo of a truth that changed everything. She looked at the small plate, the banana smile, and for the first time, she didn't see a liability. She saw a little girl. For the rest of the day, Adriana was a ghost. She stayed locked in her home office, the glass doors frosted for privacy. Evan could just make out her silhouette, pacing back and forth, a shadow of restless energy. She didn't come out. She didn't send messages. She just left them alone. It was the best thing she could have done. "Okay, Piper, what's the first rule of fort building?" Evan asked, dragging cushions off the $1,000 Italian sofa. "Rule number 1, no grown-ups allowed." Piper giggled. "Well, I'm a grown-up, so I guess I'm out," Evan said, pretending to walk away. "No, silly. You're not a grown-up, you're a dad. That's different. Rule number 2, it needs a secret password." "Got it. What's the password?" Piper thought hard. "Barnaby's fuzzy ears." "Perfect. Uncrackable," Evan declared. He draped a heavy cashmere throw blanket over 2 chairs, creating a small, dark cave in the middle of the bright, open living room. Cora watched from the hallway. She had been standing there for 20 minutes, her gray elephant clutched to her chest. She wasn't hiding, but she wasn't joining either. She was an observer, trapped on the shore. Evan and Piper crawled inside the fort. "Whoa, it's dark in here," Evan whispered loudly. "We need a light." "Piper, do you have a light?" I have my light-up sneakers. That'll work. Man, it's cool in here, but I feel like we're missing something. A dragon, Piper supplied. A dragon, Evan agreed. A friendly dragon. But where do we find one? They hunted for a dragon for a few minutes, making loud, silly whispering sounds. Cora took one step off the marble and onto the edge of the soft rug. Then another. Evan, sensing her approach, didn't look. He just spoke to Piper. You know, this fort is big. It's big enough for maybe 3 people, and a bear, and maybe an elephant? Cora froze. Piper poked her head out from under the blanket. Hi, Cora. Do you want to come in? The password is Barnaby's fuzzy ears. You don't have to say it, you just have to think it. Cora looked at Piper. She looked at the dark, safe-looking cave. She looked back down the hall toward her own empty, silent room. She took a few more steps, her bare feet silent on the rug. She stopped right at the entrance, a tiny sentinel. Evan's hand emerged, palm up. He didn't reach for her. He just left it there, a quiet offering. There's a really good spot right here. It's dragon-proof. Cora stared at his hand. It was a strong hand, slightly calloused from carrying trays, but steady. It wasn't demanding anything. It wasn't pulling her. It was just waiting. She lifted her own small hand. She didn't take his, but she reached out and with one finger lightly tapped his palm. Then she darted back, retreating to the hallway. Piper looked disappointed. She didn't come in. But she almost did, Evan said softly, watching Cora's small shadow disappear. She almost did. That's a win, Pipes. That's a huge win. Later that evening, after the girls were asleep in their separate rooms, Evan found Adriana in the kitchen. She was standing where he'd left her, but the pancake mess was gone, cleaned by a ghost. She was nursing a glass of wine. She's not asleep, Adriana said, her voice low. Cora. She's in her room, but she's not asleep. She's just sitting. She will, Evan said. He leaned against the counter, a weary distance between them. Why did you quit? Adriana asked, blunt. If you were so good at it. This speech therapy. Evan was silent for a long time, staring out at the city. My wife, Claire. She got sick, fast. One day we were arguing about what color to paint the nursery, and 6 months later, she was gone. Piper was too. He swallowed, the memory still sharp. I was a therapist. My job was to give people the tools to communicate, to connect. And I was sitting there, holding my wife's hand, and I had nothing. No words, no tools. Nothing I knew mattered. The most important connection in my life was dissolving, and I couldn't do a thing to stop it. He looked down at his hands. After she died, I looked at my patients, at these kids, and I felt like a fraud. I felt empty. I couldn't hear them anymore. The silence in my own house was too loud. So I quit. I started waiting tables. It's simple. No one asks you to fix them. They just ask for more water. Adriana was quiet. She swirled the wine in her glass. My ex-husband Damien, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He told me Cora's silence was my fault, that I was too cold, too focused, that I broke her. Is that what you believe? Evan asked. I don't know what I believe, she admitted. I just know that when I look at her, I see a failed merger. Another thing I couldn't control. Another thing I lost. She's not a merger, Adriana, Evan said softly, and she's not lost. She's just stuck. She's scared that if she opens her mouth, the same thing will happen. That you'll leave her too. I would never leave her. She doesn't know that, Evan said. She just knows the last time she was happy and talking, her world fell apart. So she made a trade. She chose silence in exchange for not losing you too. Adriana finally looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. The Ice Queen was gone. In her place was just a terrified mother. Can Can you really help her? I'm not here to fix her, Adriana, Evan said. I'm just here to show her it's safe to come out. Before she could reply, a sharp ding came from the private elevator. Adriana's head snapped up, her face instantly draining of color. I'm not expecting anyone. The elevator doors slid open. A man stood there, handsome, wearing a suit that was just a little too flashy, a charming, venomous smile on his face. Well, well, said Damien, stepping into the penthouse like he still owned it. I heard you were redecorating. But this, Addie? A waiter? That's a new low, even for you. Evan instinctively moved, placing himself slightly in front of Adriana. He had seen this kind of man before, all charm, all poison. Damien, Adriana said, her voice regaining its icy edge. You are not welcome here. Get out. Oh, I don't think so, Damien sneered, sauntering into the living room. He ran a hand over the back of the sofa. This is still half my house, legally speaking. Or did your pack of lawyers forget to tell you that? He looked at Evan, sizing him up with a dismissive smirk. So, who's the help? You the new butler. He's with me, Adriana said. With you? Don't make me laugh. Damien's eyes glittered with malice. I know all about Kenjiro Akagi, the family man, the traditionalist. And I know you, Addie. You're desperate. Let me guess. This person is the new happy husband. Damien threw his head back and laughed, a loud, ugly sound that echoed in the silent apartment. You really think you can pull this off? You think you can buy a rent-a-husband from the local diner and fool a billionaire? He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He's going to find out. And when he does, your deal, your company, your reputation, all of it, puff. What do you want, Damien? Adriana asked, her hands clenched. What I've always wanted. What I deserve, he said. A payout, a real one, 10 million. Wire it to my offshore account, and I'll forget I ever saw this pathetic little performance. I'll let you play your game. That's extortion, Evan said quietly. Damien's head snapped toward him. You don't talk. You're the scenery. You're a prop. You have no idea what you're involved in, pal. I think you should leave, Evan said, his voice level, but with an underlying steel that made Damien pause. Or what? Damien challenged. You'll throw a bread roll at me? Before Evan could answer, a small sound came from the hallway. Cora. She was standing there, her eyes wide, staring at her father. She was holding the gray elephant, and she was trembling from head to foot. Damien's cruel smile softened into something almost fatherly, but it was just as fake. Hey, pumpkin! Look at you, still playing the silent game? Daddy's here. You gonna say hi? He took a step toward her. Cora let out a tiny, choked gasp and scrambled backward, hiding behind Evan's legs, her hands grabbing his pants so tightly her knuckles turned white. Damien froze. His smile vanished. It was one thing to be ignored. It was another to be feared, to be rejected for the waiter. His face flushed a dark, angry red. You little freak, he spat. You see what you did, Adriana? You've turned her against me. You've poisoned her. She's not poisoned, Evan said, his voice dangerously calm. He didn't move, didn't want to scare Cora further. She's terrified. Of you. Now get out. Or what? Damien snarled, taking a step toward Evan. Or I'll call the police, Adriana said, her phone in her hand. You're trespassing, Damien, and you just threatened a guest in my home. Get out, now, or I'll have you removed. Damien stared at her, then at Evan, then at the small child clinging to the waiter's legs. He was beaten, for now. He straightened his suit, his mask of charm slipping back into place. This isn't over, Addie, he whispered. You think you're smart. You've just given me all the leverage I need. You, him, and that broken child. Akagi's going to love this story. He turned and stabbed the button for the elevator. Pay me, Adriana, or you'll regret it. The door slid shut, and he was gone. The silence he left behind was heavy, toxic. Adriana let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 5 minutes. She slumped against the counter, her entire body shaking. Evan waited a beat. Then he gently reached behind him and touched Cora's head. "He's gone, Cora." "You're safe." She didn't let go, but her trembling eased. "Daddy?" "Is everything okay?" Piper's sleepy voice came from the other hallway. She was standing there, rubbing her eyes, Barnaby under her arm. "I heard yelling." Evan gave her a reassuring smile. "Everything's fine, Pipes. Just a loud visitor." "Go back to bed, okay? I'll be right there." Okay," she said, disappearing back into the guest room. Adriana was watching Evan, her expression unreadable. She had just been threatened, her entire career put on a knife's edge, and this man's first instinct was to calm the children. She's never done that?" Adriana whispered. "What?" "Hidden behind someone. Like that. She usually just freezes, or runs to her room. She ran. To you. For protection." "She knows who's safe," Evan said simply. He slowly knelt, bringing himself down to Cora's level. She was still half hidden, peeking out at him. "That was scary, huh?" he said softly. She just stared. "It's okay to be scared, but you were very brave." He didn't pat her. He didn't hug her. He just stayed there, solid. "He's gone. He can't hurt you here." Cora's grip on his pants finally loosened. "I need a drink," Adriana said, her voice rough. "A real one." "No," Evan said, not looking up from Cora. "What you need is to go to your daughter's room. And you're not going to talk about Damien, or the deal, or Mr. Akagi. You're just going to sit there while she falls asleep. Can you do that?" Adriana looked at the child, who was now cautiously emerging from behind Evan. She looked small, not like a liability, just small. She nodded, wordlessly. "Okay, Cora," Evan said, standing up. "Mom's going to take you to bed." Cora looked at Adriana. Adriana, hesitant, reached out her hand, mirroring what Evan had done at the fort. Cora looked at the hand for a long moment. Then, very slowly, she placed her own small hand into her mother's. Adriana's breath hitched. She held on, as if holding a fragile bird, and let her daughter lead her down the hall. Evan stood alone in the vast, silent living room. The clock was ticking. Damien was a real threat. Akagi was coming, and he was standing in the middle of a war, armed with nothing but patience and a bag of chocolate chips. He knew, with a sinking feeling, that the worst was yet to come. The next 2 days were a blur of strained silence and quiet progress. Adriana was different. The confrontation with Damien, combined with Evan's revelation and Cora's small act of trust, had visibly shaken her. She was still the CEO, taking frantic, whispered calls in her office, but the icy certainty was gone. She was second-guessing herself, and it made her, for the first time, approachable. She stopped demanding results. Instead, she started watching. She watched as Evan and Piper laid out a huge roll of butcher paper on the living room floor. She watched as they took off their socks and dipped their feet in washable paint, making colorful footprints. She watched as Cora sat on the edge of the rug, her hands clasped, mesmerized by the mess and the laughter. "Your turn, Cora," Piper had called out, her own feet dripping blue. Cora, predictably, shrank back. "That's okay," Evan said, not missing a beat. Maybe your elephant wants to try." He held out the paint tray. Cora looked at her gray elephant, then at Evan. She took a tiny, hesitant step forward and dipped the elephant's cloth foot into the red paint. Then, very carefully, she pressed it onto the paper. A small, red, elephant foot-shaped stamp. She did it again and again. Red, blue, yellow. She didn't smile. She didn't laugh. But her entire body was thrumming with concentration, a silent, focused joy. Adriana, watching from the kitchen, felt a bizarre, painful tightness in her chest. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen her daughter play. That evening, Evan found an old acoustic guitar tucked away in a media closet, clearly forgotten. It was Damien's. The sight of it made Adriana flinch. "He never played it. It was just for show," she said, her voice laced with old bitterness. Evan picked it up. It was out of tune. He spent 10 minutes patiently twisting the pegs, his ear tilted, his expression focused. The penthouse filled with the plinking, discordant sounds of tuning. Then he started to play. It wasn't a performance. It was simple. Just 3 or 4 basic chords, over and over, a gentle, repetitive rhythm. Piper, recognizing the tune, began to sing. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Evan sang with her, his voice soft and a little rough. Cora, who had been reading a picture book, looked up. She put the book down and moved closer, sitting on the floor just a few feet from Evan's knee. She watched his fingers move on the strings. "How I wonder what you are," Evan sang, his eyes on Cora. He slowed the tempo, playing the chords even more gently. "Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky." He stopped playing but let the last chord hum in the air. He looked at Cora. "You know this part, don't you?" he murmured. He didn't ask her to sing. He just acknowledged her. Cora's lips parted, just slightly. No sound came out, but she breathed, a small, rhythmic exhale. Adriana, standing in the doorway, held her breath. It was working. Whatever this magic, this patience was, it was working. Her daughter, who had been a porcelain doll for a year, was starting to show the faintest cracks of life. The next day, the day before Akagi's arrival, the preparations began. Adriana was a nervous wreck. "He lands tomorrow at noon. The dinner is at 7. Mrs. Greer is coming back for one day. She's the only one who knows his preferences. The menu is set." She paced the living room, holding a tablet. "Now, our story. We need to practice." Evan sighed. "Adriana." "No, we have to," she insisted. "He's going to ask questions. Mr. Akagi believes trust is built on personal details. He'll want to know how we met." "Fine," Evan said, sitting on the sofa. "How did we meet?" "We met at a charity gala," Adriana said, reading from her notes. "You were a philanthropist, specializing in children's charities." Evan almost laughed. "A philanthropist?" "Adriana, I'm a waiter. He's going to know in 5 seconds I'm not some trust fund kid." "Then what?" she said, panicked. "The truth," Evan said. "Or close to it. We met at the restaurant. You were a customer. I was your waiter. We connected. It was simple. It's believable. Rich CEO falls for the normal guy. It's a better story." Adriana looked horrified. "That I fell in love with my waiter? That's not the image I'm trying to project." "It's better than a lie that falls apart," Evan argued. "What about my job? Am I still a waiter?" "No. You're a consultant," she said, tapping on her tablet. "You're advising me on the Langley Foundation's new pediatric speech therapy wing." Evan's eyebrows shot up. "You're building a pediatric speech therapy wing?" "I am now," she muttered, typing furiously. "A $10 million endowment. It'll be in the press release tonight. It makes your presence legitimate. It makes sense." Evan stared at her. She had just, in the span of 30 seconds, invented and funded a multi-million-dollar charitable foundation just to prop up their lie. The scale of her wealth and her desperation was staggering. "Fine," Evan said. "I'm a consultant. We met at the restaurant. And we've been married for 2 years," she continued. "Piper is from your first marriage. Her mother passed away. Cora adores her. We're a blended family." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "Is that okay?" "It's fine, Adriana. We need to look in love," she said, her voice small. "He's going to be watching." "We'll look like a family," Evan said. "That's the best I can do." The tension in the house was a palpable thing. It was the night before the dinner. Adriana was rehearsing menu details with Mrs. Greer. Piper was asleep. Evan was sitting on the floor in Cora's room. He was reading a story, his voice a low, calming rumble. Cora was in her bed, her eyes on his face, the gray elephant tucked under her chin. "And so the little rabbit," Evan read, "found his way all the way home, right at bedtime." He closed the book. "Good night, Cora." He stood to leave. As he reached the door, a tiny, impossibly small sound came from the bed. It was almost a sigh, a whisper of a T. "Nye," she whispered to the elephant. Evan froze. He didn't turn. He didn't react. He just stood there, his heart hammering in his chest. He was terrified that if he moved, the spell would break. He waited. Silence. He clicked off the light. "Good night, Cora," he said again, his voice thick. He walked out into the hall and leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. It was the first word. A broken, barely there piece of a word. Not even directed at him, but it was a start. He walked into the living room, where Adriana was agonizing over flower arrangements. "It's not going to work," she was muttering. "He's going to know. He's going to see the cracks. Damien is going to call, and this entire thing is going to—" "Adriana," Evan said. She looked up, annoyed. "What?" "I'm busy. These roses are pink. They're supposed to be white." "She said night," Evan said. Adriana's hand stilled on the vase. "What?" "Cora, she said night to her elephant." Adriana's face crumpled. She didn't make a sound, but two perfect tears rolled down her cheeks. She sank onto the sofa, her hands covering her mouth. The ice was gone. The dam had broken. She's in there, Adriana," Evan said, sitting across from her. "She's trying." Adriana looked at him, her eyes raw and grateful and terrified all at once. The lie, the deal, the performance. It all seemed to fade, replaced by this one tiny, miraculous sound. For a second, they weren't a CEO and a waiter. They were just two parents, staring at a breakthrough. The penthouse was transformed. The cold, sterile rooms were now filled with the warm, savory smells of Mrs. Greer's cooking. White orchids and roses graced every surface. The sharp, modern furniture was softened by ambient lighting. It looked like a home, albeit a ridiculously expensive one. Evan stood by the window, adjusting the knot on a tie Adriana had insisted he wear. It felt like a costume. "Daddy, you look like a penguin," Piper said, giggling. She was wearing a new blue velvet dress, a gift from Adriana, and she was twirling in front of the glass. "And you look like a princess," Evan said, smiling. "Now, what's the plan for tonight?" "I have to be super-duper polite," Piper recited, "and I have to show Mr. Kagi my drawing." "Mr. Akagi," Evan corrected gently. "And that's right." Adriana emerged from her bedroom. She stopped. She was wearing a simple, elegant dark green dress. Her hair was down, soft and wavy, not in its usual severe bun. She wore less makeup. She looked younger, softer. You look nice, Adriana," Evan said, genuinely. "Thank you," she said, her voice tight with nerves. She straightened his tie, her fingers brushing his collar. The brief touch was electric, and they both pulled back, surprised. The new consultant/philanthropist role requires a good tie." "Right," Evan said, clearing his throat. There was a new energy between them. The shared secret of Cora's whisper, the looming threat of Damien, the intensity of the past few days. It had forged a strange, fragile bond. Mrs. Greer appeared. "Ma'am, Mr. Akagi's car is downstairs." "Okay," Adriana breathed. "Okay, everyone, places." It was a ridiculous thing to say, but Evan understood. He took Piper's hand. Adriana went to Cora's room. She emerged a moment later, holding Cora's hand. Cora was in a little yellow dress, her hair brushed, her gray elephant clutched in her free hand. She looked like a doll, her eyes wide and anxious. The private elevator dinged. The doors opened. A man stepped out. He was not what Evan expected. Mr. Kenjiro Akagi was small, elderly, and impeccably dressed in a dark suit. But his eyes were bright, sharp, and missed nothing. He was leaning on a simple wooden cane, and he radiated a powerful, quiet authority. "Adriana-san," he said, bowing his head slightly, "it is a pleasure to finally be in your home." "Mr. Akagi," Adriana said, her voice smooth, though Evan could see her hand trembling. "Welcome. This is my family." She gestured to Evan. "This is my husband, Evan Reed." Evan stepped forward and offered his hand. "Mr. Akagi, it's an honor to meet you." Akagi took his hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. He studied Evan's face for a long, intense moment. "Reed-san, a pleasure." His gaze was so perceptive, Evan felt like the man could read his bank account balance just by looking at him. "And these," Adriana continued, her voice softening, "are our daughters. This is Piper." "Hello, Mr. Akagi," Piper said, giving a small, practiced curtsy, which made the old man's lips twitch in a smile. "And this is Cora." Akagi turned his full attention to the small, silent child. Cora immediately hid behind Adriana's legs. "Ah," Akagi said. His voice was warm. He did not loom. He did not try to talk to her. He simply knelt, a difficult task for a man his age. He placed his cane on the floor. "Hello, Cora-chan," he said softly, not to her, but to the stuffed elephant she was holding. "That is a very fine elephant. He looks very wise." Cora peeked out. She stared at him. Akagi reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small wooden charm, a little, intricately carved cat. "In my country, elephants are very good luck. So are cats. This one is for him, to be his friend." He didn't offer it to Cora. He placed it on the floor, a few feet away. A silent offering. Cora's eyes were fixed on the charm. "Please," Adriana said, gesturing to the dining room. "Dinner is ready." The dinner was tense. Adriana and Akagi talked business, projections, markets, logistics. Evan stayed quiet, as planned. But Mr. Akagi kept watching him. "And the new pediatric wing, Reed-san," Akagi said, turning to him suddenly. "A noble endeavor. You are a therapist yourself, Adriana-san tells me." "I was," Evan said, caught off guard. "A long time ago." "Why that?" Akagi asked, his gaze penetrating. "Why, children's speech?" Evan looked at Adriana. She was pale. This was not in the script. Evan began. "I believe that a person's voice is the most important thing they have. It's how we tell the world who we are. And I wanted to help kids who had lost theirs." Akagi nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "A worthy goal. And your own daughter, Piper-chan. She is very bright. She's my whole world," Evan said simply, smiling at Piper, who was carefully eating her noodles. "And Cora-chan," Akagi said, his voice gentle. "She is a quiet child." "She is," Adriana said, her hand resting on Cora's chair. She takes her time. She's an observer, like you, Mr. Akagi. It was a brilliant save." Akagi smiled. "I am. And I observe a very lovely family, Adriana-san. You have done well." Adriana's shoulders relaxed. It was working. He believed it. The deal was going to happen. "I have something," Piper suddenly announced, hopping off her chair. She ran to the living room and came back with her drawing. "It's for you!" She handed it to Mr. Akagi. It was a crayon drawing of the four of them, a tall man, a woman with brown hair, and two little girls, all holding hands under a rainbow. Mr. Akagi looked at the drawing, a genuine warm smile spreading across his face. "This is wonderful, Piper-chan. Thank you. This is the finest gift I have received all year." He was looking at the drawing, his eyes soft, when the elevator dinged. Adriana froze. Her face went ashen. I'm not expecting anyone. That must be Damien, Evan said, his voice grim. He stood up. Damien? Akagi asked, his brow furrowing. Who is? The doors slid open. Damien stood there. He was not drunk this time. He was cold sober, and he was holding a stack of glossy 8x10 photos. His eyes were bright with triumph. Adriana! Kenjiro-san, I'm so sorry to interrupt your family dinner. Damien, get out, Adriana whispered, standing so fast her chair almost fell over. Oh, I will. But first, I think Mr. Akagi needs to see the real star of the Langley Foundation. What did you call him? The consultant? He turned to Mr. Akagi, his voice dripping with false sympathy. This is a sham, Akagi-san. She hired him. He threw the photos onto the dining table, scattering them across the plates. They were pictures of Evan. Evan in his waiter's uniform, holding a tray. Evan outside the restaurant by the dumpsters. Evan walking with Piper, his clothes clearly not those of a philanthropist. His name is Evan Reed. He's a waiter at the downtown grill, Damien announced, his voice booming in the quiet room. She's paying him to be here. To lie to you. This entire family, this marriage, it's a fraud. Ask her. Adriana's world shattered. Mr. Akagi looked at the photos. He looked at Evan, and then he looked at Adriana, his face a mask of profound, icy disappointment. Mrs. Langley, is this true? Adriana couldn't speak. She was trembling, her lies exposed, her career in ruins. Damien smiled, victorious. He had won. He turned his venom on the smallest target. And you, he snarled, looming over Cora, who was frozen in her chair. You little freak. Still not talking, huh? Cat got your tongue. Or is it just that you finally realized your own mother is a... Stop. The word was not a whisper. It was a command. Hoarse, loud, and full of fury. Everyone froze. Cora was standing on her chair. Her small body was shaking, but her eyes were blazing. She was glaring at Damien, at her father. Damien stared at her, his mouth open. Leave, Cora said, her voice stronger now. Leave, my daddy, alone. She wasn't looking at Damien. She was looking at Evan. She pointed a tiny, trembling finger at her biological father. You go. Leave. Now. The silence in the penthouse was absolute. It was as if the city, the air, the world had stopped. Damien just stared, his face a mask of disbelief. Adriana had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, making no sound. Piper's eyes were as wide as saucers. Cora, having spoken her truth, suddenly seemed to realize the volume of her own voice. The fury drained away, replaced by a rush of fear. Her face crumpled. She looked at Evan, her lip trembling, and then she did something she had never done. She ran, not to her room, not to her mother. She ran straight to Evan and wrapped her arms around his legs, burying her face in his pants, and burst into tears. Loud, hiccuping, terrified sobs. Evan's hands, which had been clenched into fists at his sides, instantly relaxed. He gently placed one hand on the back of her head, shielding her, pulling her close. It's okay, Cora. You're safe. I've got you. You were so brave. Piper ran over and hugged them both, a tiny, loyal protector. You tell him, Cora. He's a mean man. The tableau was striking. The fake father, standing firm, shielding the two little girls who clung to him as if he were their anchor. Damien looked at them, then at Adriana, then at Mr. Akagi. He saw his victory, his leverage, his entire plan dissolving in the face of a 5-year-old's courage. The revelation of the lie was now completely overshadowed by the power of the moment. Mr. Akagi stood up. He walked not to Adriana, but to Damien. He was a small man, but he now seemed to tower over the younger, taller man. He did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. You, Mr. Akagi said, his voice layered with a disgust so profound it was almost elegant. You are a man of no honor. You would use your own child's pain to win a game. He pointed his cane toward the elevator. Security is on their way. You will leave this home, and you will not contact Mrs. Langley or her family again. You can't, Damien stammered. I can, Mr. Akagi said. My associates are thorough. I know exactly who you are, Mr. Damien Croft. I know about your debts. I know about your threats. You will find your access to your wife's, ex-wife's, accounts are now frozen. You are finished. Damien's face went white. He had overplayed his hand and lost everything. Without another word, he turned and fled to the elevator, a defeated, pathetic man. The doors slid shut. Silence returned, but this time it was different. It was the calm after a storm. Adriana was still by the table, shaking, her face wet with tears of shame, relief, and shock. She looked at Mr. Akagi, her poise utterly gone. Mr. Akagi, I am so sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. You have to believe me. I was desperate. You lied to me, Mrs. Langley, Mr. Akagi said, his voice firm, but the ice was gone. He walked over to the table and picked up Piper's crayon drawing from where it had fallen. You lied about your circumstances, he said, looking at the drawing. You fabricated a husband. You staged a performance. He paused and looked over at Evan, who was now kneeling, rocking Cora gently as her sobs subsided. But you did not lie about family, Mr. Akagi continued, his voice softening. He gestured to the scene. I have seen many families in my life, Adriana-san. I have seen real families with less love, less loyalty, than what I am seeing in this room right now. He looked at Evan. You, Reed-san, you are not a philanthropist. You are a waiter. But you have the character of a king. You have done what batteries of doctors and this woman's great wealth could not. You gave that child her voice back. You showed her what a daddy is. Adriana was openly crying now, a quiet, shuddering relief. The deal is on, Mrs. Langley, Akagi said. Adriana's head snapped up. What? The deal is on, he repeated. The Langley-Akagi merger will proceed, but on one new condition. Anything, Adriana breathed. I am not just investing in your technology. I am investing in your recovery, in your integrity, and I am investing in his character. He nodded at Evan. The new pediatric wing you announced? I am personally matching your $10 million endowment, and I want Mr. Reed to run it. Evan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. What? Mr. Akagi, I'm a waiter. You are a therapist, Akagi corrected gently. And you are a healer. This is not a request. It is my condition for the merger. You will not waste this gift, serving tables. He turned and bowed to them. Thank you for the most eventful dinner of my career. And thank you, Piper-chan, for the drawing. I will treasure it. He walked to the elevator. Before the doors closed, he looked back. You have a very beautiful family, Adriana-san. Do not let it go. The door shut, leaving them alone. The penthouse was a wreck. Photos were scattered. Plates were half-eaten. And in the middle of it all, Evan was kneeling on the floor, holding a crying Cora, with Piper hugging his neck. Adriana slowly walked over. She didn't say anything about the deal. She didn't say anything about the money. She just knelt in front of them in her $1,000 dress. She looked at Evan, her eyes raw. You stayed. Even when Damien, you stayed. I told you I'd help your daughter, Evan said, his voice thick. I keep my promises. She called you Daddy, Adriana whispered, her hand reaching out, hovering, afraid to touch Cora. It's okay, Mommy, Cora whispered, her face still hidden in Evan's shirt. Adriana let out a choked sob. She put her hand on Cora's back. Cora didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into the touch, and there, on the cold marble floor, surrounded by the wreckage of a lie. The three of them, and Piper, cried together. For the first time, not as a CEO, a waiter, and two kids, but as something new, something messy and strange, and very, very real. 1 month later, the city looked different. The autumn sun slanted through the window of a small second-floor apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The smells were not of sterile air filtration, but of old books, cinnamon, and the grilled cheese sandwiches Evan was flipping on the stove. Piper was at the small, mismatched kitchen table, humming as she scribbled in her coloring book. It was normal, quiet, back to the way things were. But nothing was the same. Evan was back in his waiter's uniform, his shift starting in an hour. After the dinner, the reality of Mr. Akagi's condition had settled in. The penthouse felt too big, the silence too heavy. Evan and Piper had returned to their apartment, not as an ending, but as a necessary pause. The director role was real, but it wasn't a switch he could flip overnight. "I can't just become that person, Adriana," he'd explained to her a week later, over coffee, their first real meeting. "I quit for a reason. I'm scared." Adriana, surprisingly, had understood. "Take your time, Evan," she'd said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "The foundation isn't going anywhere. Akagi-san wants you, not a rushed decision." So, for the past few weeks, Evan had tried to live in a strange, transitional limbo. He'd had meetings with Adriana and the transition team in the mornings, and had picked up a few of his old shifts at the restaurant in the evenings. The familiar weight of the tray, the simplicity of the orders, it kept him grounded. It wasn't a retreat. It was an anchor, something real to hold on to while he decided if her world was one he could, or should, truly join. The first week had been the hardest. The quiet of his own apartment felt like a void. Piper kept asking when they would see Cora again. Evan didn't have an answer. He put the sandwiches on plates and sat down across from Piper. "Eat up, Pipes. I've got to go." "Okay, Daddy." She took a bite, then looked up, her eyes serious. "I miss Cora. And I miss Mrs. Langley, too." Evan's heart ached. "I know, baby. I do, too." A sharp, hesitant knock echoed through the apartment. Evan frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He opened the door. Adriana Langley was standing in the hallway of his walk-up apartment building. She was not the CEO. She was wearing jeans, a simple blue sweater, and sneakers. Her hair was in a simple ponytail. She looked like a person. Beside her, holding her hand, was Cora, clutching her gray elephant. "Hi," Adriana said, her voice small. Evan just stared. "Adriana, what are you doing here?" We were in the neighborhood," she said, which was an obvious lie. She'd clearly driven an hour across town. Cora has something for you." Cora, no longer hiding, stepped forward. She was holding a piece of paper. It was a new drawing. Evan took it. It was a picture of the four of them, Evan, Piper, Adriana, and Cora. They were in a small kitchen. Evan was wearing his waiter's uniform, but he was flipping pancakes. They were all smiling. It's our kitchen," Piper yelled, running to the door. "Cora!" "You came." "Hi, Piper," Cora whispered, a shy smile on her face. She ran past Evan and hugged Piper. The two girls immediately ran to Piper's room, their chatter filling the apartment. Evan looked at Adriana, who was watching the girls, her expression soft and unguarded. I did something," Adriana said, turning back to him. "Oh? I turned him down." Turned Mr. Akagi down," Evan said, shocked. "No, not the deal," she smiled. "I turned down the director of the foundation job." "On your behalf." "You, what?" "And then I quit," she said. Evan's jaw dropped. "You quit?" "Langley Innovations, but it's your name." "It's just a name," she said, shrugging. I I took a step back. A leave of absence, maybe permanent. I told the board I was going to oversee the new Langley Akagi Foundation, full-time, as an unpaid volunteer. Adriana, why? Because you were right, she said, her eyes meeting his. I was a terrible boss, but I was an even worse mother. I've been spending the last month just being with her. We painted. We went to the park. She told me a knock-knock joke yesterday. It made no sense, but she laughed. She took a deep breath. The foundation is real. Mr. Akagi's money is real, and it needs a director, a real one, someone who knows what they're doing, someone who believes a voice is the most important thing a person has. Evan was speechless. I'm not asking you to come into my world, Evan, she said, her voice quiet. I'm asking if, maybe, we could build a new one. Together. The foundation. Me and you. And the girls. She looked so hopeful, so terrified, so completely different from the woman in the alley. I'm not a CEO, Adriana, she whispered. I'm just Adriana, and we miss you. I miss you. Evan looked at her. He looked at the drawing in his hand. He heard the sound of Piper and Cora giggling in the other room. His small, quiet apartment had never felt so full. He looked at his watch. His shift started in 45 minutes. He unclipped his name tag from his uniform. He set it on the table. You're right about one thing, Evan said, a slow smile spreading across his face. What's that? I'm starving. And I'm really tired of this uniform. He looked toward the kitchen. I was just about to make some pancakes, but I'm all out of chocolate chips. I brought some, Adriana said, pulling a bag from her purse. Evan laughed. He opened the door wider. Come on in, Adriana. The pan's still hot. She stepped inside, and as she passed him, her hand brushed his. She didn't pull away, and neither did he. The apartment was small, and the furniture was old, but for the first time in 5 years, Evan Reed felt like he was finally, completely, home. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Every story has a character or a moment that pulls you in. I'd be honored to hear which part resonated most deeply with you, or maybe a time you felt something similar. And please, say hello, and let us know what part of the world you're in. It makes this big world feel a little smaller and a little warmer, knowing we're all sharing this moment. I believe that sharing and listening to stories is one of the most powerful things we can do. It's a reminder that no one is truly alone. If these are the kinds of stories that feed your soul, think about hitting subscribe. It's not just a button, it's you saying you want to keep this conversation going. Your presence here makes all of this worthwhile. Seriously. Until next time, walk gently and carry a good story with you.